What happens when a royal guest turns a light-hearted chat into a full-blown disaster? In just 37 seconds, one offhand comment would completely shatter Prince Harry's image and get him thrown off one of television's most beloved talk shows. Before we dive into this wild story, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because today we're pulling back the curtain on the darker side of celebrity culture. The unfiltered moments that TV networks never want you to see. We've got the raw footage they tried to bury, and you won't want to miss a second of it. All right, let's talk about what really happened that night. The Graham Norton Show has always been known for being fun, relaxed, and effortlessly entertaining. Celebrities come on, share a laugh, tell a few stories. It's light, it's charming. It's the kind of show where everyone leaves smiling. And Graham himself? One of the most likable hosts on television. Quick-witted, disarming, and impossible to dislike. That evening's lineup looked incredible. Prince Harry was set to appear alongside a few big-name stars. The audience was buzzing, the atmosphere electric. This was supposed to be an easy, upbeat interview. When Graham walked out on stage, the crowd erupted. He greeted everyone with his signature grin, tossed out a few jokes, and set the tone for another great night. Then came the royal entrance. Prince Harry, smiling, waving, and settling comfortably onto the famous red couch. At first, everything went as planned. Graham asked some simple questions. Recent projects, life updates, public appearances. Harry answered politely, but there was something off. His tone was clipped, his smile tight. He seemed distracted, maybe even irritated. Still, Graham kept the energy up, doing what he does best. Then came the joke. It was light, playful, exactly the kind of humor Graham's audience loves. The crowd laughed, but Harry didn't, not even a smirk. Instead, he just stared at Graham, his expression cold and unreadable. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, sharp enough to cut through the laughter. Graham noticed immediately and tried to move on, shifting gears to a more neutral topic about family. But Harry's reply was short, dismissive. He clearly wanted no part of it. Trying to steer things back on track, Graham brought up a funny story from the news. Something harmless, a guaranteed icebreaker. But that's when it happened. Harry leaned forward slightly and said flatly, "Is this really what you want to talk about?" "This is beneath me, honestly." The audience froze. You could feel the tension spread across the room like static. Graham blinked, taken aback but kept his composure. "Well," he said with a polite smile, "we're just having a bit of fun here. That's what the show's all about." Harry didn't smile back. He leaned further into his seat, crossed his arms, and said, "Fun? You call this fun? I thought we'd be having an intelligent conversation, not this tabloid nonsense." Now the studio was dead silent. A few awkward coughs, one or two nervous laughs. Everyone could sense the energy shift. The warmth was gone. Still calm, Graham said, "We can absolutely talk about whatever you'd like, Your Royal Highness. What would you prefer to discuss?" Harry rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes, and said, "Maybe something that actually matters instead of these ridiculous questions." That was the moment things turned icy. Graham's trademark smile flickered. You could tell he was holding his composure by a thread. He replied, still kind but firm, "I think the audience is here to have a good time. This isn't a hard-hitting news interview. It's a chat show." Harry scoffed, loud enough for the microphones to catch it. Then, looking Graham straight in the eye, he said, "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you should try being a real journalist instead of a comedian playing dress-up." Gasps filled the studio. It was a gut punch, unexpected, brutal, and completely out of line. Graham's expression went blank for a moment, his charm stripped away. One of the other guests shifted uncomfortably, trying to say something to ease the tension, but Harry cut them off sharply. "No, I'm serious," he said, and in that instant, Everyone in the room knew. The interview was over, and so was Prince Harry's welcome on the show. "I'm tired of these pointless interviews," Prince Harry snapped. "All fluff and no substance. Nobody ever asks real questions anymore." The room seemed to shrink around them. Graham Norton's voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge in it now. "With all due respect," he said evenly, "you agreed to come on this show. You knew exactly what kind of show this is. We've been doing this for years, and most of our guests," he paused, "usually enjoy themselves." Harry let out a laugh, but it wasn't friendly. It was cold, mocking. "Enjoy themselves?" he said, leaning forward. "You think they're enjoying it? Most of them are here to plug a movie or a book. They pretend to laugh. They play along. Because they have to." The other guests shifted uncomfortably. No one dared speak. The audience, moments ago so lively, now sat in stunned silence. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a train wreck unfolding in real time. Graham's trademark smile faltered. For once, he didn't have a quick quip ready. There was something almost wounded in his eyes. Disbelief. Maybe even hurt. He took a slow breath and said quietly, "I think maybe we should take a short break." But Harry raised a hand. "No," he said sharply. "Let's not take a break. Let's actually talk about this." He gestured toward the set, his tone growing more confrontational. "You bring people on here, ask them shallow questions, make jokes at their expense and expect them to smile. Well, I'm not playing along anymore." Something in Graham's expression changed. The warmth drained away, replaced by composure edged with steel. His voice, still calm, but now firm, cut through the tension. "I've never made jokes at anyone's expense in a way meant to be hurtful," he said. "Everything we do here is meant to be lighthearted. If you're not comfortable with that, then perhaps—" He paused, meeting Harry's glare. "You shouldn't have agreed to come on." That was the breaking point. Prince Harry stood up. Just stood, mid-interview, his expression defiant. The audience gasped. "You know what?" he said, pointing at Graham. "You're right. I shouldn't have come on. This show is a waste of time. And frankly," he sneered, "so are you." The words hung in the air like a slap. Graham rose slowly to his feet. His face was red now, but his posture remained poised, dignified. When he spoke, his voice trembled only slightly. "I think you need to leave," he said. Harry laughed again, that same cruel, dismissive laugh. "Oh, you're kicking me off now? How precious," he mocked. "The little talk show host kicking out a prince. I'm sure this will do wonders for your ratings." But Graham didn't flinch. He met Harry's eyes, unblinking. "Yes," he said clearly. "I'm asking you to leave. You've been disrespectful to me, to my team, to our guests, and to this audience. We don't treat people like that here, and I won't let anyone treat me that way either." At first, only a few people clapped. Then the applause grew, louder and louder, filling the studio. The audience was standing with Graham. Security began moving toward the stage. Prince Harry looked around, incredulous, as if he couldn't believe they were siding with the host. "Fine," he said, throwing his hands up. "I'm leaving. But everyone watching should know. This show is a joke, and so is your host." Graham said nothing. He just watched as security escorted the prince off stage. Harry muttered under his breath the entire way, still trying to salvage some dignity. The applause followed him out. Not for him, but for the man who'd stood his ground. When the door finally closed, the studio went quiet again. Graham turned to the audience, his face composed but pale. He took a deep breath. "Well," he said softly, "that was unexpected." A small ripple of laughter broke through the tension. "I do want to apologize," Graham continued. "That's not the kind of show we run here." The audience applauded again, this time with warmth. One of the guests spoke up, visibly shaken but supportive. "Graham, you handled that beautifully. That was completely out of line." Another nodded. "I've never seen anything like that in my life." Graham managed a small, weary smile. "Let's move on," he said quietly. "Let's try to have a good rest of the show, shall we?" And somehow they did. The remaining guests rallied. They told stories, shared laughs, tried to rebuild the mood, but everyone knew the night would be remembered for what had already happened. Within hours, the clips flooded the internet. Social media exploded. Hashtags, think pieces, reaction videos. People couldn't believe what they'd seen. The verdict was nearly unanimous. Prince Harry was branded arrogant, entitled, and out of touch. Graham Norton, on the other hand, was being hailed as a consummate professional, a man who stood up for himself with grace. Talk show hosts from across the world chimed in. Comedians defended Graham. Entertainment journalists dissected every frame of the confrontation. Everyone had an opinion, and nearly all of them condemned the prince's behavior. By morning, one truth was clear. Graham Norton had walked away with his dignity intact. Prince Harry had not. The clip spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere. Replayed on news broadcasts, dissected on entertainment programs, and looped endlessly across social media. Every platform, every headline, every timeline showed the same moment. Prince Harry standing, pointing, and calling Graham Norton a waste of time. It became the image, one that defined the fallout. But what made it worse for Harry was that this wasn't seen as an isolated outburst. People began digging through old interviews, resurfacing moments when he'd come off as defensive, dismissive, or entitled. A pattern started to emerge, one that painted a very different picture than the one his publicists had worked so hard to maintain. Suddenly, this wasn't about a single bad night. It was about character. Meanwhile, Graham Norton found himself surrounded by an outpouring of love and support. Fans flooded social media with messages praising his composure. Ratings for the Graham Norton Show actually went up. People tuned in not out of curiosity, but out of solidarity. They wanted to back the host who had stood his ground with grace. Behind the scenes, Graham's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from fellow hosts, comedians, and celebrities poured in. Some private, some public. "You handled that perfectly," one text read. "That couldn't have been easy." The other guests from that night spoke out too. In interviews, they described how tense the atmosphere had been, how uncomfortable it was watching things unravel in real time. But every single one of them praised Graham for staying calm, for keeping his dignity, and for not stooping to Harry's level. No one blamed the show. No one blamed the format. Everyone blamed the behavior. Industry insiders began chiming in next. Producers, agents, and entertainment executives started whispering stories about other difficult encounters with Harry. Hints that this wasn't the first time he'd been a challenging guest. Some stopped hinting altogether. "He's not easy to work with," one anonymous producer told a British tabloid. "There's a sense he expects special treatment, even when he's not owed it." Public relations experts on morning shows analyzed the damage in brutal detail. They called it a textbook PR disaster, the kind of meltdown that takes years to recover from. "He turned a harmless interview into a confrontation," one expert said. "And in doing so, he exposed something the public won't forget. Entitlement." The contrast between the two men couldn't have been sharper. Graham, calm, grounded, and professional, even under direct insult. Harry, defensive, combative, and visibly losing control. Clip after clip replayed the moment when Graham tried to save the conversation, offering Harry multiple chances to reset. And each time, Harry made it worse. The infamous line, "Maybe you should try being a real journalist instead of a comedian playing dress-up," became a cultural lightning bolt. It wasn't just disrespectful. It was dismissive of a man who had spent decades earning respect in one of the toughest industries in the world. Graham Norton, the award-winning broadcaster, The interviewer trusted by everyone from Meryl Streep to Tom Hanks. Reduced in one sentence to a punchline. The image of Harry standing, finger pointed while Graham remained seated and composed, became iconic for all the wrong reasons. It captured everything people resent about celebrity entitlement. The loss of humility. The belief that fame excuses bad behavior. And perhaps most telling of all was the audience's reaction. They didn't side with the prince. They sided with the host. When Graham asked Harry to leave, the applause that filled the studio wasn't awkward. It was earned. For the Graham Norton Show, it was unprecedented. Never in the program's long history had a guest been escorted off set. The show had hosted difficult personalities before. Actors mid-controversy, politicians dodging questions, even rock stars under the influence. But never outright disrespect. Prince Harry had made history for all the wrong reasons. The incident reignited a broader conversation about fame and manners, how quickly status can distort empathy, how easy it is for power to eclipse decency. People debated what it meant to earn respect versus demand it. Commentators on both sides of the Atlantic discussed whether celebrity culture had become too insulated, too detached from ordinary civility, and through it all, one truth kept resurfacing. Graham Norton had shown real class. He didn't shout. He didn't insult back. He didn't humiliate his guest in return. He drew a line, clearly and respectfully. That was what resonated with people. Even his apology to the audience afterward, brief and sincere, cemented that impression. He didn't have to apologize, but he did, because he cared about the experience of the people watching. That, everyone agreed, was the mark of a true professional. In the end, it wasn't about a prince and a talk show host. It was about two kinds of people. Those who believe titles command respect, and those who know respect is something you earn. And when the dust settled, it was clear who the public believed had earned it. There wasn't much debate about who was right and who was wrong. The behavior was so obviously inappropriate that there wasn't really another side to argue. Prince Harry had made himself the villain of his own story. The footage didn't lie. You could see Graham trying, again and again, to keep things friendly, to hold the interview together. You could see Prince Harry's cold, clipped answers, his dismissive tone, and you could feel the exact moment when the tension snapped, when the air in the studio changed and everyone realized they were witnessing something that had gone far beyond uncomfortable. Something historic. Then there was Graham's face, that flicker of realization that, for the first time ever, he was going to have to ask a guest to leave his show. The other guests looked helpless. They tried to step in, to steer the conversation somewhere safer, to bring the laughter back. But Prince Harry wouldn't have it. He was determined to make his point, even if that point was nothing more than proving he thought he was better than everyone else in the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Usually the Graham Norton Show is filled with laughter, applause, the hum of energy you can feel through the screen. But that night you could have heard a pin drop. The audience sat frozen, wide-eyed, watching the kind of meltdown nobody expected from a royal. And when they finally did react, when Graham stood his ground and asked Harry to leave, their applause was thunderous. They weren't clapping for the prince. They were clapping for Graham. Think about what Harry actually said. He called the show beneath him. He said Graham was just a comedian playing dress-up. He called the entire interview a waste of time. He told Graham to try being a real journalist. He mocked the show, the format, and by extension, everyone watching. These weren't offhand remarks. They were deliberate, cold, calculated insults meant to demean. And for what? Because Graham asked a few light-hearted questions? Because the show wasn't serious enough for his liking? Harry knew what kind of show he'd signed up for. He wasn't ambushed. He was briefed, prepped, and aware. But instead of playing along, he chose to sabotage the moment. He turned something easy and joyful into something bitter and cruel. And that's what people couldn't forgive. Because thousands of A-list guests, Oscar winners, pop icons, politicians, even other royals, had sat on that same couch and laughed, played along, and shown grace. Nobody else had ever been so disrespectful that they had to be escorted off. That says something. When things didn't go his way, Harry lashed out. Graham, on the other hand, stayed composed. He was being insulted on his own stage, in front of millions. And yet he never once lost control. He didn't retaliate. He didn't humiliate back. He simply set a boundary and held it. That's class. That's professionalism. The moment also became a reminder that basic respect still matters. Whether you're in a palace or a studio, manners are universal. Looking down on someone because you think their job isn't important enough doesn't say anything about them. It says everything about you. Prince Harry acted as if being there was a favor, as if his time and presence were gifts to the room. But the irony is brutal. In trying to assert his importance, he destroyed his own image. If he'd simply smiled, laughed, and played along, the audience would have adored him. Instead, he created a scandal that will be replayed for years to come. People remember moments like that. They remember when a celebrity shows their true colors. They remember when arrogance overshadows kindness. And they remember when someone tries to belittle a host who's beloved by millions. That moment is now part of Prince Harry's legacy, whether he likes it or not. Graham Norton's legacy, though, it only grew stronger. He proved that decency still matters, that respect still matters, and that a true professional never loses their cool, even in chaos. He didn't just protect his show, he protected its spirit. When the cameras stopped rolling, the studio erupted into a standing ovation. It wasn't polite applause. It was real. People were on their feet because they knew what they'd just seen. A host standing up for himself against someone who thought they were untouchable. And that's why, in the end, this incident will be remembered not as a royal scandal, but as a masterclass in professionalism. It's a lesson in what happens when entitlement meets grace, a reminder that respect isn't optional. It's earned, and proof that audiences will always stand behind the person who's in the right, no matter how powerful the other side may be. Prince Harry walked onto that stage, thinking he was above it all. He walked off having revealed exactly who he really is, and Graham Norton, calm, steady, and unshaken, became the unexpected hero of a story he never asked to be part of. But he handled it perfectly, and that's why people will remember him. Not for the scandal, but for the strength. So what do you think? Was Graham right to ask him to leave? Should Prince Harry have handled things differently? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're always bringing you the real stories Hollywood doesn't want you to know.